Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. After being burnt by Phoenix flames the night before, Burning Heaven clan was already extremely disordered and messy. The entire sect was filled with a thick and heavy burnt smell. Who would have ever thought the mighty Burning Heaven clan that loftily looked down upon the world would one day fall to such a miserable extent? And all of these were only because of one person. They had thought that with the appearance of their Grand Clan Master and Grand Elder, this catastrophe which came from Yunche would also end there. Unexpectedly, in just a day, Burning Heaven clan had once again been ruined to such a state of devastation. Fen Ijue didn't sleep for an entire night. His aptitude was extraordinary from childhood. He had almost never been defeated when growing up, and in the end, became one of the few beings at the most pinnacle of the Blue Wind Empire. He never would have thought that after going into seclusion and cultivating for many years, he could actually be played around and shamed by a junior of not even 20 years of age. Even his apathetic state of mind, which had been silent for 20 years, almost collapsed completely because of this. Early morning, in Burning Heaven clan's great assembly hall, of the 33 pavilion masters and 27 elders, only 22 people entered their seats. Moreover, more than half of them had injuries on their bodies. They looked at each other with hearts filled with sadness. The moment Fen Ijue arrived, a panicked voice came from the outside, "Clan Master, this is bad, this is bad." Fen Duanhuan abruptly stood up and said with a solemn voice, "What is there to be so panicked? It's young Clan Master. Right now, he is currently being hanged on top of Blue Fire City's city gate." What? What? All the elders stood up with shock. Fen Duanhuan's head was also buzzing, and he almost exploded on the spot. Preposterous. The bones in Fen Ijue's entire body were making cracking sounds, and he explosively rushed outwards in a violent rage. As he stepped out of the sect, he forcefully stopped his steps, clenched his teeth tightly, and spoke with a rage that he tried to suppress using all his strength. Yunche is extremely shrewd, and this may very possibly him luring the tiger out of the mountain again. "Zia, you stay here." "Yes." Fen Zia stopped his steps and lightly nodded. In the next moment, Fen Ijue had already taken off into the air, directly rushing toward Blue Fire City. Fen Duanhuan and a dozen elders followed closely behind. Blue Fire City's city gate was currently overflowing with crowds of people, clamoring all over. Above the tall city gate, a person was suspended above by a thick and long rope. The person dangling there was completely stripped naked without a single thread of clothing, his hair was as messy as a bird's nest, and his entire body was completely limp, not struggling in the slightest. Even though both his eyes were open, they did not have any color or focus, as though he was a dead person. But the occasional twitching and convulsion of all the muscles on his body proved that this was clearly a live person. Blue Fire region was hot all year long, and even the morning wind carried a wave of scorching heat. Yet the person being suspended above the city gate was shivering and convulsing non-stop within the hot wind. A little worm as thick as a mere pinky was even occasionally swaying under his groin. More and more people came before the city gate, and when every single one of them saw the person dangling up there clearly, they were all shocked, flabbergasted, because this person was known by everyone in the Blue Fire region. He was the number one in the Blue Fire region's younger generation, and was more so the future overlord of the entire Blue Fire region that no one had ever dared to offend and provoke. Burning Heaven clan's young clan master, Fen Juecheng. This being existing at highest level in the entire Blue Wind Empire was actually completely stripped naked and hung above the city gate. Citizens of Blue Fire City were filled with endless shock, they almost could not believe their own eyes. Blue Fire City's mayor had already arrived whilst rolling and crawling when he received news of it long ago, but had shriveled up in a corner and still didn't dare to give the order to let Fen Juecheng down. As the mayor of a city, he naturally was not an idiot. Someone who dares, and had the ability to humiliate the Burning Heaven clan's young clan master to such a degree, was undoubtedly someone he couldn't afford to provoke. If he were to give the order to let Fen Juecheng down, it was very likely that he would provoke an extremely terrifying enemy. As the surrounding onlookers continuously increased in number, this extraordinarily big news that was enough to stir up the entire blue wind dispersed out with incomparably shocking speed. Driven by sound transmission talismans, it had long ago spread to the distant blue wind imperial city. In the eyes of these onlookers, Burning Heaven Clan was originally an existence so high that it was absolutely impossible to climb up to. Even an ordinary disciple of Burning Heaven Clan would receive their endless envy, and they wouldn't dare to slightly offend him. They had absolutely never thought that they would actually see such a scene one day. They all faintly had a premonition that Burning Heaven Clan, and even the entire Blue Fire region, was about to go through a change in regime. A wave of abnormal wind howls came from the south, and a surge of imposing pressure also suddenly arrived, making everyone's breathing suddenly and simultaneously stop. Their chests were so uncomfortable, as though a boulder weighing 1,500,000 kilograms had pressed onto their chest. They subconsciously looked to the south. In the skies up above, a tiny black dot appeared, but in just an instant, this black dot had already abruptly magnified in their vision. Its speed was fast to the point of surpassing their cognition. Fen Ijue flew the entire distance with his fastest speed, and as he arrived at Blue Fire City's gate, he saw Fen Jueching dangling above the city gate fully naked at first glance. And below him were packed crowds of onlookers pointing and discussing. Fen Ijue's eyes stared wide. His chest almost blew up on the spot from extreme rage and humiliation. Fen Ijue, who had cultivated his heart for a few dozens of years, who had lived for nearly 100 years, actually let out a roar, as though he was a maddened wild beast. Within his roar, his entire body ignited with fire, and he extended his hands, directly grabbing toward the Fen Jueching suspended in midair. Just as he was no more than 15 meters away from Fen Jueching, a phoenix-shaped flame suddenly surged up toward the skies below him, blasting straight at Fen Ijue's face. With bloodshot eyes, Fen Ijue retreated backwards, and slapped the phoenix flame away with a palm. His eyes that were about to burst stared fixedly at that figure below him. Yunche leisurely walked out while dragging Dragon Fault. Every single step he took, the marble ground below him would directly crack apart, left with an extremely deep footprint. Looking at Fen Ijue, who was in midair, he sneered, "You're finally here. To actually make me wait for so long, looks like this grandson of yours doesn't seem to be of any importance to you either. Dirty swine." Fen Ijue's chest sharply undulated, surging with a raging killing intent which he wished could turn physical and grind Yunche into pieces. "I must personally grind your bones into flying dust." Ha 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 ha. Hearing Fen Ijue's words, Yunche actually started to laugh with extreme disdain. "What are you laughing for?" Fen Ijue's expression was dark and cold. "I'm laughing because your Burning Heaven Clan are all a bunch of presumptuous idiots." Yunche raised up the Dragon Fault, the sword tip directly pointed at the midair Fen Ijue. A wave of aura containing the presence of the dragon god silently dispersed out, making the surrounding crowd feel suffocated and dizzy. They all quickly retreated under fear until they backed up to a distance they felt safe in. "Originally, I had numerous matters to take care of, and bothering with your Burning Heaven Clan wasn't worth my time, yet you guys had obstinately forced me to come to your doorsteps. You only have yourselves to blame for being reduced to such a miserable state, and it isn't the slightest unjust. As for you, did you think that the reason I was always avoiding you was because I fear you? HMPH, perhaps 10 years later, I would dread you. But the you're right now doesn't have the qualifications to be insolent in front of me. But a pity, you already won't live for 10 more years. Today, I will personally destroy you." Yunche sneered, "I don't know whether or not I can live for 10 more years, but what I am sure of is that you definitely won't live for more than 10 days. As Yunche's voice fell, he fiercely rushed out. Sword light bloomed on the Dragon Fault, as it swept up a storm and shrouded toward Fen Ijue. "Presumptuous. Today, I'll let you know the consequences of provoking my Burning Heaven Clan." Fen Ijue swung his palm. 3 strokes of flame tongues over 1 foot thick furiously shot out and simultaneously exploded in midair, causing Yunche's attack to suddenly slow down. Burning Heaven Flame, Pyretic Hell. Purple flames explosively ignited from Fen Ijue's entire body, and his black hair flew upwards against gravity. Waves after waves of flames surged up to the skies. They poured out like flames from hell and caged down toward Yunche in a fashion that blotted out the skies. Shocked cries resounded from everywhere before the city gate. That ball of purple flames surging to the skies was half a kilometer away from the nearest crowd of people, but they still felt as if they were instantaneously placed in bubbling lava. Their entire bodies had even almost started to burn. Even in their entire lives, they had never seen such a terrifying power. On one hand they panically retreated while screaming, and on the other, they fixedly stared with wide eyes at those overwhelming purple flames. Because in their entire life, they might not have another chance to witness a battle of this level ever again. You will immediately know, what is the true burning heaven flame? I'll burn you to the point that even the ashes of your bones won't remain. Die? Fen Ijua's voice was ruthless and hideous. His hatred toward Yunche had already deeply seeped into his marrow. Yet facing his burning heaven flames, Yunche wielded Dragon Fault in his hands and didn't move at all, letting the avalanching purple flames flood toward him until he was completely swallowed within. Break! An enormous noise following a dragon cry that shook one's soul came from within the purple flames, instantaneously blasting away the purple flames that engulfed Yunche, turning them into countless completely dispersed embers that scattered in all directions. Yunche stood where he was unharmed, not even a single hair was burned. He laughed mockingly, "Oh? So this is your so-called burning heaven flame, I've at last witnessed it. It's simply laughable to the point that my sides are hurting, ha 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 ha." Fen Ijue's eyes slightly bulged outwards as shock filled his entire face. With a grasp of his palm, a completely scarlet-colored long blade of over 9 feet in length appeared in his hand. The body of the blade was wrapped with raging fire. The name of this blade was Absolute Flame, one of the only 2 sky-profound weapon that Burning Heaven clan possessed. It was left by the Burning Heaven clan's ancestral founder, and using it to unleash fire-attributed profound arts would exhibit an even greater power. I almost forgot, you can release Phoenix flames, and aren't too afraid of flames. Then I'll let you die under the Burning Heaven blade. Fen Ijue's body swiftly descended and pierced out. A long blade beam over 15 meters encircled by incomparably scorching purple flames charged forward. Bang! 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 Dragon Fault greeted the blade, and in the blink of an eye, the heavy sword and the blade beam had continuously collided for over a dozen times. Purple flames were swept up and scattered about everywhere. The incredibly ear-piercing collision sounds almost made the eardrums of the audience over several kilometers away burst open. Overlord's fury. Dragon Fault swung upwards through the air, its force instantly explosively increased as the thick and heavy sword body smashed onto the blade beam while carrying violent power. Bang! The 15-meter blade beam instantly shattered, and the residual force of Dragon Fault surged up to the skies, blasting toward Fen Ijue. Fen Ijue coldly snorted. With a palm strike downwards, he dispersed the Dragon Fault's power. It was also at this moment that the image of a ball of purple-colored flame suddenly appeared behind him. Around Yunche, an enormous purple ring suddenly appeared as well. Burning Heaven Domain. You are indeed somewhat stronger than what I had expected, but no matter how strong your combat power as a mere Earth-profound realm is, you will never be able to resist against a throne's domain. Burning Heaven Domain. After a few frontal exchanges with Yunche, what Fen Ijue felt was far more than, somewhat stronger than my expectations. The shock in his heart was like the turbulent waves. Clearly only having the profound strength at the Earth-profound realm, yet wasn't slightly disadvantaged under his Burning Heaven flames and Burning Heaven blade, this was something he totally did not expect. As Grand Clan Master of the Burning Heaven clan, the pinnacle being of the current world, true throne, to actually be unable to take care of a mere Earth-profound realm practitioner after several strikes, especially under the gazes of the masses, his patience and face could no longer hold out, for he directly released his powerful domain skill. Waves of fire tumbled and churned around Yunche as the purple flames surged to the heavens. Following Fen Ijue's loud shout, the world in his vision had suddenly become a pure purple. The purple flames that could even quickly melt fine steel filled every inch of space around him. It was as though he had suddenly been imprisoned in a world of raging flames. Purple flames and burning to ashes was the only rule of this world. The entire Blue Fire City's temperature abruptly rose. Looking from afar, it actually seemed like an extra purple sun had appeared in midair. The purple-colored flames light blotted out both the sky and the sun, and even the surrounding space was scorched to the extent of distorting. Domain. That's the domain that could only be casted at the Emperor Profound Realm. I actually saw the legendary domain with my own eyes. Yunche is completely engulfed by the domain. No matter how strong he is, it'd be basically impossible for him to live after entering this kind of domain, right? Burning Heaven domain was different from Frozen Cloud Asgard's control domain and Yunche's soul domain. It was a pure attack type domain. This domain wasn't built upon the caster, but instead was built around the enemy, locking the enemy into an inescapable domain with endless flames. Yunche's body, which was locked inside the domain, swayed and swiftly dashed toward the front. However, there seemed to be no end to this flame world. After dashing at full speed for a long while, he was still actually unable to break out. With the evil god's power protecting him, he wouldn't be harmed even if these flames were 10 times stronger. If it was someone else, even if they were at the later stages of Sky Profound Realm, they would certainly be heavily injured from being burnt by now. Yunche stopped his steps, but laughed heartily. Fen Ijue, do you think a mere domain would be able to trap me? This domain of yours isn't worth even a single cent in my eyes. With an explosive shout, Yunche brought up all the strength in his body and blasted a sword strike forward. The incomparably ferocious power condensed into a mighty sword beam of over 3 meters wide in front of him, breaking through and directly blasting the tumbling raging flames ahead. Boom! With a huge sound, the place where Dragon Fault smashed instantly formed a void of over 3 meters wide in the flames. The residual force of the heavy sword maintained the void, causing the surrounding flames to be unable to spread into it at all. With a twist of his body, Yunche rose again, stepping with Star God's broken shadows, dashing everywhere within the Burning Heaven domain. Every time his body shifted, the heavy sword would bring about a huge rumbling sound. In the turn of an eye, Yunche consecutively swung out over 100 strikes, blasting the entire world of flames and riddling it with thousands of gaps. Looking from the outside, that sun, suspended in midair, had actually seemed to have turned into a huge sieve all of a sudden. Bang 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 bang. A noise similar to crystals shattering resounded, and the heavily damaged Burning Heaven domain finally, and completely, shattered under Yunche's last sword strike. Large amounts of purple flames quickly scattered toward different directions, causing the space around them to distort from the impact. You actually broke my domain. After opening Burning Heaven domain, Fen Ijue didn't immediately go save Fen Juecheng, because he wanted to personally hear the scream of despair coming from Yunche. But after more than a dozen breaths of time had passed, not only did he not hear the sound he wanted to hear, he had instead seen his Burning Heaven domain be blasted with one hole after another, before directly collapsing. He was shocked to the point where his soul had almost flown out into the heavens. When he saw Yunche walking out of the shattered domain, his pupils abruptly stared wide, as he couldn't dare to believe his eyes at all. Because Yunche, who was trapped within the domain for over a dozen breaths of time, wasn't the slightest harmed from head to toe. Impossible, this is impossible. Fen Ijue's body swayed, as his voice uncontrollably leaked out. He couldn't accept the scene he saw, he couldn't accept it no matter what. The domain was a power that only Emperor Profound experts could release. In the Blue Wind Empire, domain is undoubtedly the most pinnacle of power. In the entire Blue Wind Empire, there were no more than 10 people who could cast domains. Once a domain was casted, other than those pinnacle experts who were similarly at Emperor Profound Realm like him, there was simply no one who could resist against it. Because the power of domain was not merely the suppression in terms of power, more so, it had the suppression of planes and nature's law. Emperor Profound and Earth Profound, there were a whole 2 planes of difference. That originally ought to be an absolute suppression that couldn't be resisted and countered no matter what. But the outcome was that his domain was actually broken by this profound practitioner of the Earth Profound Realm. Moreover, it only lasted for over a dozen breaths of time. Him using the domain so soon was precisely for burning Yun Che to death in the shortest amount of time. He hadn't expected that this would be the outcome in spite of everything. At this moment, a sliver of fear was suddenly born in Fen Ijue's heart. A fear that he may really fall under Yun Che's hands. And to a strong being of his level, once this sliver of fear emerged, it would instantly transform into an endless malice and bloodlust. I had said before that your domain isn't worth even a single cent before me, Yun Che said as he coldly laughed. Fen Ijue lifted up his absolute flame blade, as his voice filled with extremely cold and thick killing intent. Your strength has indeed surpassed my expectations, and indeed is worthy for me to use all my strength. Ho? Yun Che's lips disdainfully curled up. It's like you're saying you haven't used your full strength yet. Fen Ijue's face violently convulsed. He raised up the absolute flame blade, and said with a cold tone, I seem to have made a mistake from the start. Perhaps it's because you possess the Phoenix's bloodline, your control over the laws of fire had far surpassed my expectations. It's difficult to harm you with ordinary profound fire, and I simply shouldn't use profound fire to deal with you. Otherwise, how could an insignificant Earth Profound Realm practitioner like you be able to resist against the power of the Emperor Profound Realm? With an explosive cry, Fen Ijue's absolute flame blade slashed down from above. This time, there weren't any flames ignited on the absolute flame blade, there was only a blade beam over 3 foot long. Even though it was only a blade strike without any fancy tricks, the crowds over several kilometers away all felt a force that could sever mountains and rivers in half. Because this was a blade strike that came from a throne. The biggest reason why Yun Che could deal with Fen Ijue before, was because he didn't fear profound fire in the slightest. However, this absolutely did not mean that he could make light of a throne's mighty profound strength. Watching the trajectory that absolute flame blade slashed down, his brows slightly knitted as he greeted it with a sword strike. The sword's body and the blade's edge collided together, an array of eye-piercing light unleashed in midair. The two colliding energies entangled into a vortex that surged up to the sky, and the surrounding ground was completely ripped apart as shattered stones, sand, and dust shot outwards without restraint. The spectators over a few kilometers away were impacted by a storm that suddenly arrived, to the point where the blood and air in their body churned. They had no choice but to conjure their profound energy to protect themselves, while some of the ones weaker in profound strength were directly sent tumbling away from the impact. And even the closest of them from Yun Che and Fen Ijue were at least a kilometer away. The intimidation of the two's energy colliding had caused everyone to be terribly startled. This was the strength of a throne. Yun Che consecutively retreated 7 or 8 steps as the blood and gas in his body churned. Dragon Fault dragged out a long ditch on the ground, and all of the shattered stones beneath his feet were also tramped into fine sand. Fen Ijue tumbled away in midair. Then his figure suddenly paused, and abruptly drew down a stroke of grey shadow in the air, instantly charging within 30 meters of Yun Che. The absolute flame blade slashed out countless blade mirages which shrouded toward Yun Che. ZZZ. Both the space and earth were crazily sliced apart by the blade beams, and countless criss-crossed blade marks instantaneously bore on the ground surface. Yun Che retreated one step after another. Every single one of Fen Ijue's blade beams contained the genuine power of the Emperor Profound Realm. Even though the constitution of his body was extremely strong, it definitely wouldn't be pleasant if he were to be touched by any of these blade strikes. Using Star God's broken shadow, Yun Che's figure drifted back and forth through the blade beams like a ghost, but he didn't have any chance to counterattack for a short while. In the turn of an eye, Fen Ijue had already slashed out over 1,000 strikes, and over 100 meters of surrounding land had completely turned into a beehive from the destruction. As expected, without using the burning heaven flames, you don't even have the chance to counterattack. And no wonder you could run rampant in my burning heaven clan. Even though the power of burning heaven blade without fire has greatly fell, it is already enough to chop you into mincemeat. With continuous low shouts, Fen Ijue floated in the air as blade beams slashed down, tightly suppressing Yun Che, who couldn't use the profound floating technique. And at this time, Fen Duanhuan and the elders of Burning Heaven clan had finally arrived as well. They saw Fen Ijue and Yun Che's fight at first glance. When seeing Yun Che being completely suppressed by Fen Ijue, they all secretly breathed out a sigh of relief. And in their eyes, this was the outcome that should be happening. Even if Yunche was stronger, how would it be possible for him to be stronger than their Burning Heaven clan's Grand Clan Master? But when he saw Fen Dueching dangling above the city gate without a single thread of clothing on, the blood in Fen Duanhuan's entire body almost flowed backwards and leaked out. Even though Fen Dueching had committed a great fault and was the main reason why the sect had suffered such a great disaster, he was still his biological son. And more so the young clan master of Burning Heaven clan. He had actually received such a cruel and inhumane humiliation. After today, how could he still establish himself in Blue Wind Empire? Also, to what extent would Burning Heaven clan be mocked? Fen Duanhuan loudly roared, took off the ground and rushed toward Fen Dueching. It was at this time that the eyes of Yunche, who was being pressed backward step after step, suddenly glimmered, as a cold smile flashed through the corner of his lips. His retreating steps suddenly stopped as an extremely overbearing energy storm exploded outwards. Falling moon, sinking star. A dragon cry pierced the skies and dragon fault heavily smashed onto all of the sword beams ahead of him. With a huge rumbling noise that sounded like the collision between two enormous mountains, all of the sword beams were instantly shattered. The broken sword beams shot out, scattering like razor blades. Fen Yijue flew backwards over 100 meters away in the air. The part between his thumb and index finger that held on blade burst apart, and a blood vessel on his right arm exploded as a spring of fresh blood rushed out. After blasting Fen Yijue away with a sword strike, Yunche vaulted up and neared Fen Dueching, beating Fen Duanhuan to the punch. With a swing of the dragon fault, a stroke of phoenix flames suddenly shot out, blasting onto Fen Dueching's body. The phoenix flames explosively ignited the instant they touched Fen Dueching's body, and spread all over his entire body. Fen Dueching, who appeared to be no different from a dead person, suddenly uttered screams of agony that were as miserable as banshees under the burning of phoenix flames, while his entire body painfully struggled like a violently wriggling earthworm. Shenga! Fen Duanhuan's pupils shrunk as he let out a shriek that tore through his chest. By that time, the rough rope that was suspending Fen Dueching had also been burnt and broken. Fen Duanhuan rushed before Fen Dueching, who had fallen onto the ground, and discharged his profound energy without holding back, yet he was still unable to quench the flames on his body. He could only stare wide-eyed as his own son lost his last struggle amidst his shouting, as a living and breathing person was reduced to a pile of burnt ashes before his own eyes. The flames of the phoenix's fire far surpassed any ordinary profound fire. In just a few breaths of time, Fen Dueching had been thoroughly burnt, and even his bones had been burnt to ashes. Let alone leaving a corpse, even his bone ashes were dispersed swiftly by the wind. Fen Duanhuan stood there, his face deathly pale, as if he had just experienced a terrifying nightmare. Trembling, he turned his hand, finger pointing towards Yunche, as he let out a low howl. Yunche. Your heart is so vicious. A cold smile covered Yunche's face as he muttered lowly, "My good heart is only saved for those who are good to me. I've never known what pity I should be taking when treating those who are worse than dogs and pigs. The reason why I've waited for you to come to kill him is so that you can taste the pain and consequences of losing a loved one when provoking me. I'll kill you." Fen Duanhui has completely lost control of his emotions. Grabbing onto the burning heaven blade, he let out a shout, and rushed towards Yunche while yelling madly. "You aren't his match, back down!" Fen Yijue shouted. In the face of his father's scolding, the Fen Duanhuan, who had never defied an edict, did not take heed in the least as he rushed towards Yunche like a madman. Even the profound energy on his body was in utter chaos. Clang! Fen Duanhuan's burning heaven blade was sent flying by a single strike from Yunche. The second strike landed on his chest, shattering all the protective profound energy on his body in an instant. Fen Duanhuan threw up blood incessantly, and fainted after falling straight down from the sky. He, who was at the 9th level of the sky profound realm, wasn't fit to be Yunche's opponent. In the great mess his mind was in, he had even been grievously injured by Yunche in just 2 hits. Fen Yijue's eyes had already turned red as he watched wide-eyed when his grandson had been reduced to ashes while his own son was injured severely. He crowed coarsely, "This enmity will never be reconciled." All the profound energy in Fen Ijua's body was crazily set into motion. In a split moment, the aura that he had been releasing suddenly burst exponentially. In his rage, all the energy in every cell of his body flared up, and with a loud howl, he charged towards the top of Yunche's head with his sword. An enormous wave of a profound tornado welled up from the tip of the sword, bringing with it a shriek that split the heavens and the earth. Rip! Yunche dodged backwards. The ground under his feet was instantly gouged out by the profound storm, forming an extremely large hole. Fen Ijua's eyes locked unyieldingly onto Yunche. Extending the palm of his left hand, he formed an eccentric hand sign, and a majestic wave of energy suddenly condensed and burst out. Burning Heaven Print! In an instant, a violent ripple suddenly ripped through the space between Fen Ijue and Yunche suddenly. A handprint of enormous might pressed down, crushing towards Yunche's skull just like the hands of the sky. Being suppressed by the matchless tyrannical energy caused a momentary stagnation in Yunche's actions. Yunche's movements slowed as his eyes grew cold. Lifting Dragon Fault, he gave a great shout and rushed up to face it. Boom! The rolling thunder-like explosive sounds thoroughly penetrated the entire Blue Fire City, causing the ears of people a few kilometers away to buzz as their visions darken. A wave of an almost solid profound energy storm crazily dispersed out, and Blue Fire City's stone city gate was shattered from the impact as if it was made of rotten wood. The overwhelming sand and dust, as well as the suddenly erupting purple flame cloud, shrouded Yunche and Fen Ijue's silhouettes. Everyone was staring with their eyes wide, waiting for that ball of flowing dust and flame cloud to disperse without blinking at all. They wanted to know just who exactly had obtained the upper hand, and whether or not Yunche, who was mythologically strong, had endured a furious strike that came from a throne. From within the fire cloud and flowing dust, colliding rumbles of sword and blade came. Under the profound energy storms that continuously exploded, the fire cloud and the sand quickly dissipated, revealing Fen Ijue and Yunche's figure. Both of Yunche's sleeves were completely busted apart, lines after lines of small blood marks riddled all over his arms, and there was even a hint of blood on the corner of his lips. Fen Ijue's clothing was similarly utterly tattered, and a stroke of a long and thick blood mark that startled one's eyes was on his arm. This enmity between us, even if I have to burn up all my blood essence, I'll kill you. Fen Ijue's gaze was ferocious. His face was savage, completely devoid of the elegant demeanor that a clan's grand clan master should have. He even appeared nearly insane. Every single one of his attacks were fiercer than the previous, but they were all defended by Yunche. Then you'll have to burn through your blood essence for me to see. The great, honorable Burning Heaven clan's grand clan master is actually unable to cope with a small junior like me. You're not just trash, you're a pitiful and ridiculous piece of trash that only knows how to talk big. Yunche sneered, toxically. Ah. Fen Ijue's eyes stared widely, and with a roar, another Burning Heaven print came crashing down. Boom! Both men flew out and collapsed simultaneously as a 100-meter-wide hole appeared in the ground that had already been ruined beyond comprehension. Fen Duanhuan was supported up by Elder Zhong and was quickly fed a healing pellet. Watching the fight between Yunche and Fen Ijue, none of them did not feel scared witless. Up until then, they had originally been seeing Yunche getting suppressed completely by Fen Ijue. But Yunche seemed to have not been using his full strength then, and against Fen Ijue, who was currently in violent rage, a practitioner of the 4th level of the Emperor Profound Realm, a strong fighter who sat loftily at the pinnacle of the practicing world, he seemed to actually be completely not at a disadvantage. He had even taken all of Fen Ijue's extremely strong Burning Heaven prints head on. This Yunche, how on earth did he train to actually fight on the same level as the Grand Clan Master? An elder spoke as his mouth trembled. Rumors say that he is a person from the Divine Phoenix sect. But the junior generation of the Divine Phoenix sect all say that they've never met a person like him. Some rumors also say that he is the descendant of one of the sacred grounds. What sort of person must his master have been? Earth Profound against an Emperor Profound practitioner, forget about ever seeing it before. In all the history of the Blue Wind continent, this had never even happened before. What kind of experience and seniority does our Grand Clan Master possess? Yunche might be at a deadlock with our Grand Clan Master for the moment, but once the fight drags out, he'll definitely not be a match for our Grand Clan Master. This battle between Fen Yijue and Yunche caused their hearts to be in a continuously trembling state. But they seemed to have simultaneously neglected a point, which was the fact that Fen Yijue had the absolute advantage in terms of position and movement. He could freely fly using profound energy, but Yunche couldn't. His attack effectiveness was also greatly discounted in this unfair fighting condition. Piercing Sun Blade. Even though the blade's body was devoid of fire, the might of this blade was still extremely terrifying. Following the absolute flame blade slashing path, a fissure of over 100 meters long and unknown depth spanned the ground. Yunche's left shoulder to his left ribcage instantly burst out with blood as a streak of a bloody wound that one could almost see the bones was torn apart. His footsteps also retreated with a stagger. Taking the chance while Yunche's body was unbalanced, Fen Yijue fiercely rushed down from above, and an enormous handprint diagonally pushed toward him. Burning Sea Print. Bang! Dragon Fault was forcefully pushed aside by the frightening power, and the handprint that hid an overbearing strength solidly smashed onto Yunche's chest. Yunche's lower body instantly sunk into the ground. An arrow of blood sprayed out from his mouth as his face was also dyed with a touch of paleness. Before Fen Yijue had the chance to wildly laugh, something blurred in his vision, and Yunche had actually already disappeared from his original location as a wave of energy even more violent than his burning sea print was already blasting toward his chest. When Fen Yijue was afloat, Yunche could only defend most of the time. Taking the chance of him rushing down to attack, an Overlord's fury combined with Star God's broken shadow heavily smashed onto Fen Yijue's chest. The heavy sword's energy storm loudly exploded on his chest. Boom! Two of Fen Yijue's ribs snapped with a crack, and his body was smashed flying 100 meters away. Holding his chest, blood leaked out from the corner of his mouth while he glared viciously at Yunche. Yunche's breathing was heavy, his gaze cold and sinister. Wiping away the bloodstain on the corner of his mouth, he said coldly, "The one who will die today can only be you." Fen Yijue spat out a bloody sputum and said with an overcast tone, "I have to admit that you are indeed a great prodigy. Not even 20 years old, yet you could actually do battle with a throne. In the history of the Blue Wind Empire, you are worthy of being number one. But you are the enemy. Since you are the enemy, the more prodigious you are, the more you must die. Even though your strength is shocking, you are still too young, and already have the indications of exhaustion. As this fight goes on, you'll definitely not be my match." "Is that so?" Yunche coldly laughed. Straightening his body, a dreadful field of energy flooded above the dragon fault. "Are you really that sure that my strength is only temporarily even with yours? You seem to have been using your full power." "But I haven't yet." Fen Yijue froze for a bit, then wildly laughed with disdain. "Your internal energy is already weak, and your profound energy is already in chaos, yet you still dare to shamelessly boast like this. What an enormous joke. Since that's the case, then let me see your so-called full power." Rainbow Slicing Blade. Light shot in all directions from the absolute flame blade, and for a short while, it even obstructed the light that came from the sky. Before this blade strike fell, its might had already caused the crowd several kilometers away to feel their entire bodies turn cold. At this moment, an explosive roar came from afar. "Clan Master, I shall assist you." Sand and dust were swept up from the south as a fierce wind surged. A grey-cloaked elderly man carrying a golden long blade swooped over. Seeing this person, all of the Burning Heaven clan's elders revealed joyous surprise. "Grand Elder." Fenzia had found out about everything that had happened here through sound transmission. He dashed to Fen Yijue's side, and he was astonished as he saw that Fen Yijue was actually carrying injuries. While furiously glaring Yunche, he said with a sullen voice, "This lad destroyed our sect, killed our disciples and elders, and even crippled and killed young clan master. For this huge debt of blood, even 10,000 of his lives wouldn't suffice as compensation. I know that Clan Master doesn't wish to join forces, but this lad. I understand. Today, we'll join hands and strike him down here. Do not give him any chance of escape whatsoever." Fen Yijue said with bloodshot eyes, leaving him with a sliver of life is even better. Letting him die just like this is seriously too good for him. All right. Fenzia responded with a nod. One in front and one in the back, the two surrounded Yunche with him at the center. The two extremely strong Emperor Profound auras tightly locked him down. The sand and dust that were swept into midair all froze there under the extremely terrifying energy field, and didn't float down for a long time. Grand Clan Master and Grand Elder are joining forces. This time, Yunche will definitely die. This devil's pawn, his corpse must be minced into 10,000 pieces. An elder of Burning Heaven clan said with resentment written all over his face. Faced with Fen Ijue in front and Fen Zia behind him, it was as if two chunks of metal plate weighing 1,500,000 kilograms heavily pressed onto Yunche's chest and back. His two hands grasping dragon fault secretly tightened, as sweat perfused his forehead. His pair of eyes were as cold as a spring in winter. He was going up against two great Emperor Profound simultaneously. In the Blue Wind Empire, where Emperor Profound practitioners were as rare as phoenix feathers and Cheline horns, this was practically a situation that would never happen. Today, it had actually happened to him, a youth who was merely 19. Whether or not he gets defeated or killed today, or even perhaps miraculously win, in any case, he would shake the blue wine down, straight to its core. Even though battling with Fen Ijue was extremely difficult for Yunche, he had complete confidence in defeating, and even killing Fen Ijue after figuring out Fen Ijue's full strength, because he had many trump cards that Fen Ijue could never expect. But Fen Zia's appearance was outside of Yunche's expectations, making him feel way more pressure than before. Yunche, no matter how shrewd and despicable you are, you have still fallen in our hands. Today, even if you have extraordinary miraculous powers, you won't be able to escape my palms. Die? Fen Zia flew up, his golden flame blade brought up a 9-meter-long flame chain and smashed down, with the intent to lock Yunche within the flame chains. Fen Ijue also loudly roared. The absolute flame blade blossomed with brilliance as blade beams explosively shot out, piercing straight toward Yunche's throat. The enormous might of two great Emperor Profound simultaneously attacking made the clouds and wind before the Blue Fire City gate sway. The sky had even suddenly darkened, as though the storm of the apocalypse was about to come. Yunche's figure swayed, instantly forming into 4 figures moving in 4 different directions. Fen Ijue and Fen Zia simultaneously saw 2 Yunches coming straight at their face. Rip! Fen Ijue's blade beam pierced Yunche's afterimage, and sliced out a ripple in space that lasted an instant. Fen Zia's blade posture changed, and the thick chain of flames twined in the air, simultaneously entangling the 2 Yunches. One of the Yunches instantly disappeared, and the flame chain that touched Yunche's true body disappeared as if it had touched 1,000-year-old profound ice. Yunche's heavy sword swung out like a swooping dragon, as an overlord's fury violently smashed down. Clang! Fen Zia consecutively retreated over a dozen steps, his entire right arm became severely numb as it faintly trembled. On his golden flame blade, a 2-inch wide gap as well as a cracked line that almost spread through 1/3 of the blade's body had shockingly appeared. It's actually a Emperor Profound sword. Fen Zia looked at the heavy sword in Yunche's hands, as that terrifying might actually cause the golden flame blade in his hands to involuntarily tremble. Fen Ijue and Fen Zia had the absolute advantage in terms of movement, and it wasn't like Yunche didn't have any advantages, which was the absolute suppression in terms of profound weapon. Fen Zia's golden flame blade was a pinnacle-ranked earth profound weapon which neared the sky profound, but the 2 realms of difference made it a completely suicide for golden flame blade to face against dragon fault, directly breaking it in just 1 collision. Fen Ijue's sky profound weapon, absolute flame blade, also had countless gaps of various sizes on the blade's edge from colliding with dragon fault earlier. Zia, his comprehension of the law of fire far surpasses common sense. It is very difficult for profound fire to harm him. Don't waste profound energy to use profound flames, instead, use the Burning Heaven blade and Burning Heaven Prince to deal with him. Fen Ijue said with a leaden voice. Understood. Fen Zia nodded, and directly put the golden flame blade away. Both of his hands simultaneously formed hand gestures. Burning Heaven print was the Burning Heaven clan's insurmountable profound skill and requires an Emperor Profound Realm's profound strength to cast. In the entire Burning Heaven clan, only Fen Ijue and Fen Zia could conjure it. Even Fen Moli, who was half a step into Emperor Profound Realm, didn't have the ability to use it. Even though every Burning Heaven Prince's expenditure of power was enormous, it possessed a might that could cause the sky to rumble and the earth to shatter. In terms of small area destruction, it even far surpassed Burning Heaven Flames on the same level. Burning Heaven Print. Burning Sea Print. Two enormous handprints came to thrones, carrying an incomparably terrifying pressure as it smashed down from the sky above. Forcefully countering against a single Burning Heaven print would be no pressure at all for Yunche. But directly defending against two thrones Burning Heaven prints, even if Yunche's strength fundamentally laid in ferocious power, it would be very difficult for him to do. If he were to forcefully block it, it would be accompanied by extremely great exhaustion and unpredictable danger. He continuously casted Star God's broken shadow, his body dispersing into four mirages that couldn't be told apart from the true body, and chaotically drifted around under the Burning Heaven print that came from above. Boom! 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 Every single time a Burning Heaven print smashed down, a 6-meter-deep enormous pit would be blasted in. The clothes on Yunche's upper body were already extremely tattered, but he had not yet received any real damage. With his body of the Dragon God, he wouldn't receive too heavy of a wound even if he were to frontally take a Burning Heaven print, let alone the impact of its residual energy. Fen Ijue and Fen Zia were both in the high sky 60 meters up, looking down from above as their position was already undefeatable. Their Burning Heaven prints had even more so, caused Yunche to consistently be in danger from the smashing, without any spare strength to counterattack at all. But after over 100 Burning Heaven prints, their expressions also became heavier and heavier. Yunche's movement profound skills really were eccentric to the extreme. About those four figures that continuously scattered and shifted, they simply couldn't discern which ones were real and which ones were fake. Under the continuous attacks, even though they made Yunche look to be in an extremely difficult position and completely at a disadvantage, they clearly knew that not even one handprint had directly smashed onto Yunche yet, while every single Burning Heaven print would be accompanied by extremely great consumption of energy. After smashing down over 100 Burning Heaven prints, they both distinctly felt the enormous exhaustion of their profound energy. Burning Mountain Print. A shaped handprint shrouded down from above, and an overwhelming pressurizing force plummeted down like a mountain. Before it even reached the ground, the earth below was already deeply caving in. Boom! The ground was entirely flipped up and countless shattered stones were blasted flying over 100 meters into the air. Instantaneously, Yunche's figure appeared in a flash over 30 meters away as if teleportation, yet was still forced to retreat backwards from the impact of energy. He didn't resist against this surge of impacting force, and let his body tumble into the air. A vicious glimmer flashed across his eyes, and with a low roar, Dragon Fault violently swept up toward Fen Zia's direction. Phoenix. Break. The two continuously smashed down Burning Heaven prints from above, pressing Yunche to the extent of unable to breath. But they absolutely didn't expect that Yunche, who was being blasted flying by the Burning Mountain print, could actually counterattack all of a sudden. That stroke of Phoenix flame suddenly striking toward them was as fast as a meteor. The heat and might it carried made Fen Zia's expression slightly change. No longer having time to avoid it, he could only fill his palms with energy, then push it out toward the Phoenix flame flying at him amidst a loud roar. Boom! Phoenix flames exploded in front of Fen Zia and poured down a rain of Phoenix fire all over the sky. Phoenix Break was absolutely not as simple as pure Phoenix flames. It was more so filled with the berserking power of the heavy sword. Even though Fen Zia and Fen Ijue were both of the Emperor Profound Realm, Fen Zia, who was at the second level of the Emperor Profound Realm, was far weaker than Fen Ijue, who was at the fourth level of the Emperor Profound Realm. Yunche's heavy sword attacks was something that Fen Ijue could barely defend against, but it wasn't something that Fen Zia could handle. With a miserable scream, Fen Zia's left wrist directly dislocated. The instant the Phoenix flames touched his palm, it quickly ignited as if meeting dried grass, and completely engulfed both of his palms in the blink of an eye. After he drove the Phoenix flames away with extreme difficulty, his two palms had already been badly scorched, and nearly half of his hands were burnt black. Places that were most heavily scorched were even revealing spooky white bones. Fenzia practiced fire-attributed profound arts for his entire life and had extremely great resistance to profound fire, yet was still rendered to such a miserable state. If it was someone else that dared to forcefully receive the phoenix flame like this, both of their hands would probably be burned to the point where only the bones would be left. This brat! Fenzia quickly wrapped his hands with profound energy, grimacing from the acute pain. HMPH, I had thought that capturing him alive would be best, but now, it's better to just directly send him to hell. Zia, lend me your strength. Fen-Ijua said solemnly as he took a glance at Fenzia's state of injury. Fenzia slight froze for a bit, then understood what he meant. Flipping up both of his palms, he pressed onto Fen-Ijua's back without contact, and poured his profound energy into Fen-Ijua's body without restraint. Brat, you actually dare to wound me. This time, I'll make you pay the price of being smashed to bits and pieces. Fenzia viciously roared as he stared at the Yunche below. Fen-Ijua, who was in front of Fenzia, clasped his palms as all the energy his body crazily surged. On the surface of his body, shockingly emerged a scarlet-colored brilliance. When looking at it, it was as if blood was leaking out. A wave of extremely terrifying imposing pressure also caged the space below, and everything within a few hundred meters completely fell into stasis under this pressure. Could it? Could it be? Fen-Ijua's appearance made all of the Burning Heaven clan's elders simultaneously think of that ultimate profound skill in legends, and for a moment, they were all excited to the point that their entire bodies trembled. Their eyes stared as wide as possible and didn't dare to blink even once, afraid to miss any single moment that would happen next. Burning God Print Devil's Pawn, meet your death. Fen-Ijua explosively roared and blood-red handprint blasted out, quickly expanding as it swiftly descended. In the blink of an eye, it had already filled the entire space above, as though the entire sky had been flipped upside down. Not only did this profound print's power surpass the ones before by several-fold, it also enveloped nearly 300 meters of space. Even if Yunche consecutively used Star God's broken shadow, he wouldn't be able to escape. Continuously retreating several steps, he firmly watched the blood-colored handprint that became increasingly near as a deep viciousness flashed through his eyes. With a low roar, a dragon's cry and a wolf's howl resounded through the heavens as a sky wolf slash blasted out toward the air. Rumble. The sky wolf's image collided onto the blood-colored profound print and unyieldingly stalled the enormous blood-colored profound print in midair. This scene made both Fen-Ijua and Fenzia reveal an expression of shock, as the profound energy in their entire body surged, pouring into the burning god print. Crackle, crackle, crackle. After a short stall, the burning god print once again pushed down, slowly engulfing the sky wolf's image bit by bit. And in this entire process, the burning god print was also gradually shrinking, but the shrinking speed was clearly above the speed of the wolf image being engulfed. In the end, when the sky wolf's image was entirely engulfed, and the burning god print that was still nearly one-third its size abruptly fell, it smashed onto Yunche's body. The rampaging energy savagely tore apart his protective profound energy and rushed into his body. A noise as though a bedsheet was being ripped apart sounded, and the clothing on Yunche's upper body completely burst apart. A stream of blood from within his mouth, chest, and shoulders respectively shot out. His entire person was violently smashed below the ground, then deeply buried by the sand and stone that fell after being swept up. A wave of shocked cries came from afar. Yunche, who had not lost under the might of Emperor Profound Realm since the beginning, was finally heavily smashed down this time. That handprint was so frightening, it made them deeply believe that simply no one in the entire Blue Wind could defend against it. Has Yunche, the heaven-blessed prodigy who broke history, truly fallen this time? Looking at the ground below that buried Yunche, Fen-Ijua slowly retracted his palm. Fenzia also lowered his arms, and said with a frown, to actually forcefully dissipated nearly 70% of burning god print's power, this brat is simply a monster. But having eaten a burning god print of 30% power is also enough for all of his organs to burst apart. No, he shouldn't be dead yet. Fen-Ijua said, but this is fine too, even if he isn't yet dead. He would certainly be on the verge of death. Letting him die like this is simply too good of a deal for him. Let's go and drag him out. Boom. Just as Fen Ijue and Fen Zia was about to descend, an explosion suddenly came from below. The ground was completely blown up, blasting off sand and stones like an overwhelming tide of flying grasshoppers. A figure vaulted out from within and heavily landed on the ground. His head was messy and his clothes were tattered into countless strips of cloth. Bloody wounds covered his entire body, as lines after lines of blood flowed down the heavy sword and then fell onto the shattered ground. What Fen Ijue and Fen Zias felt at this time could only be described as utterly terrified. Even though the Yunche who jumped out from the ground below was full of bloody wounds and looked to be in an extremely sorry state, he stood as straight as a pen and his body didn't sway in the slightest. Not only that, the aura of his strength was not in the slightest weakened compared to before. Instead, it carried an ice-cold killing intent several times more gruesome than before. With this appearance of his, let alone on the verge of death, he couldn't even be considered heavily wounded. At most, he was in an injured state a little bit more serious than being lightly wounded. Moreover, his strength barely deteriorated at all because of this. Being hit by the burning heaven print, yet actually only received such a wound. Was his body forged from fine steel or something? Amidst the terribly shocked gaze of the two great thrones, Yunche slowly lifted his head. An extremely terrifying, ferocious and sharp aura was being emitted from his eyes. You have, successfully, enraged me. Episode 48 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.